Hi, everybody. I'm John Dunn, and welcome to the Elation Hour. This is
episode 2. Thank you for tuning in.
Last week, if you joined us, we had Matthias Hinrichs, our global product man, discussing kind of the roadmap for Elation. This week, we're kind of taking off on our next track within this Elation Hour, which is tools and techniques, and we're going to be focused on TV and broadcasts. Today, we'll be joined by Victor Fable, Joshua Hutchings, Ed Motts, and of course, Matthias will be joining me as my sidekick for the rest of these Elation Hours. Unfortunately, Victor wasn't able to join us live, but he was able to sit down with our own Eric Loader and Matthias, of course, to do a pre-taped interview, and we'll be cutting back and forth into some video clips and get his insight and feedback as we go through the discussion. Welcome, Ed, Josh,
Hello.
Matthias.
Hi there.
Thank you guys for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
It's gonna be
How's
great.
everybody doing in lockdown?
Surviving.
I like the setup behind you, Ed. That looks good. You're a little creative
Yeah.
at home. Get your juices flowing.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Scott, I got nothing better to do. So the wife lent me her office, so I had to spruce it up a little bit.
Nice. So for those who may not know Josh and Ed, let's let them give a little background on themselves, then we'll also cut to Victor at some point here. So Josh, why don't you start us off, get a little background, a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. My name is Josh Hutchings. I'm a Los Angeles-based lighting designer. Kind of got my start coming up when I was 12 or 13, started working in community theaters, starting sweeping the stages, as most of us have. Worked in community level theaters through junior high and high school, along with high school programs. Got my first start professionally working for a theme park in Anaheim, Disneyland. That's where I met Ed. Had some amazing opportunities there. Got to design and program shows, from everything from weddings at the castle to stage shows to parades to you name it. All aspects of entertainment really there. That led into working with some relationships with some other outside lighting designers, predominantly some television people. John Morgan was the first designer that really started to get me into television and got me started up at VLPS as a programmer. Started programming for VLPS shows, turning into PRG shows and the evolution of VLPS through PRG. And then started really getting more and more into television. My first big primetime show that I got the opportunity to do was Dancing with the Stars, which I did the first 6 seasons as the programmer for. Then moved over to American Idol and America's Got Talent as a programmer for several years. And got the opportunity there with a couple other production companies and start subbing out for other lighting designers, and really started becoming a lighting designer about 5-6 years ago, making the transition from programmer, working on shows like America's Got Talent. Currently, I'm the lighting designer for Match Game, $100,000 Pyramid, Let's Make a Deal, Press Your Luck, Card Sharks, To Tell the Truth, Supermarket Sweep. I'm also the lighting designer for the current Ricky Martin Movie Miento tour, which hopefully will get back out on the road soon. And that pretty much leads us to today.
So you're not really busy at all.
Well, not right now, but typically, yeah, I'm very fortunate to be a working lighting designer, and keeps pretty busy.
Fantastic. Ed, how about yourself?
I started off actually in theater also. I started off as a stage manager actually on a kids touring show for a small local theater company. Moved up to their equity stage managing job. And then I got tired of actually being a babysitter and started dabbling in lighting, doing the installs and stuff like that. And then moved up the ranks. And then actually the same theater, a friend of me and Josh's, came in as the designer and was like, dude, come work for me at Disney. Come work for me at Disney. So ended up going to Disney, where I met Josh. And then kind of the same path as Josh, except for different people. People would come into Disney. I think one of my first early TV shows. I think it was me and Josh and Bob Barnhart, I think, came in to do something at Disney. Josh was at one stage and I was at the other. And then slowly moved out of there. Had the people make the right connections. Good friend of mine, Michael Nevitt, introduced me to a TV lighting designer, and then I jumped in with him and was with him as his programmer, moved up to his lighting director. Shows like Deal or No Deal. God, I'm trying to remember some of those shows. And then little by little, just got into the lighting directing, designer stuff. I still actually do all rounds of lighting, from wedding to corporate to trade shows to touring, whatever pays the bills for me, to be honest with you. Currently, I have American Ninja Warrior, Holy, and what else is airing? I think Hell's Kitchen is airing. And that's pretty much it.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Now let's hear a little bit from Victor about his background. Victor.
Well, I started back in 1984, 1985 with Bash Lighting in New York City, who was actually not in New York City. They were in New Jersey. They had this copy of a Verilight called a Motolite, and Steve Helliker, who passed recently, well, a couple of years ago, gave me my first start and let me go out and run these Motolights on a Performer 4 Gold, which was like crazy for that time. And then shortly thereafter, I went over to Vanco and Verilight, and then spent a good majority of my working career at the console with Verilight. And then right around 2005, 2006, pretty much stopped programming and became a designer full time. So have a lot of years behind the desk.
Well, it seems obviously something that you guys all share, including Matthias. It's kind of starting as a programmer. Matthias, you want to share some insight on that and how you got started? I mean, obviously you chose this side of the world, and these gentlemen decided to keep going with where they were programming.
Yeah, the programming part is, as a programmer, you get involved in sort of all different aspects, from the setup, the drafting, the lighting direction. So there's actually a lot of, you get really involved with everyone on a show. And I think it's like a good jumping off position for something like what Ed and Josh do. Actually, Ed and I programmed Deal or No Deal together the first season. We were known as Hans and Franz back then, so it was quite fun. I ended up, going on the manufacturing side, and there's actually quite a few programmers and like lighting console people that end up in moving light design and product management. So that's one way to go. And then obviously what Josh and Ed do, they take their experience, they have a lot of technical background, they have a lot of artistic background, and it's just a very good merger of all different aspects of a job that leads you then to actually being a really good lighting designer.
So Ed, why don't you kind of get us a little bit about that progression? So starting at Disney, programming, doing that show with Bob Barnhart and Josh, and now into a Ninja Warrior and Hell's Kitchen and a few of the other shows you've been doing.
I think Matthias, hit it right on the top of the nail, because it's being a designer. I think you need to know what's out there, what the fixtures limitations are, what new fixtures are coming out there. So when you started off as not even stepping back, not even a programmer, as just a tech, knowing what boundaries, I guess, not even boundaries, knowing what needs to be done and time. Because a lot of times on my shows, what happens is that, the first thing is budgets, and then how long it's going to take to get stuff loaded in, and you're trusting your crew. And I don't know how it is for Josh, but with me, I have a core guys that I've had now, God, a good 10 years. So it's trusting them. So Sorry, I'm jumping off topic. Um, but going from a programmer to LD, sorry about that, guys. Your
Well, how long did it take? Like, what was kind of like the time frame that you spent?
I
As a
mean, I know I started in 97 full time as a lighting guy. And then I started at Disney 2000. And then I think I left Disney 97, 98. And I left for Deal or No Deal. And then also I was lighting Jennifer Lopez, doing a lot of one-offs and stuff like that for her. Which, I mean, for me on concerts a lot, I love to be behind the desk, you know, at least programming it so that you're not having to go back and forth with someone. I know on bigger shows where I can't do that, it does not bother me a little bit, but there's stuff where you have to have that relationship with your programmer.
Fair enough. Josh, how about a little bit about your progression?
I think there's a saying in television that the lighting designer is 80% politics and 20% art, and the programmer is 80% art and 20% politics. It's a very unique relationship that television lighting designers have with their lighting directors and their programmers, in as much as the speed and pace that the television shows rehearse and shoot at. Often we have only 1 or 2 days in the studio per episode when you're looking at several songs or whatever else that you're doing. There's a real trust factor that you bring in with that relationship. So when you're a programmer, a lot of things are on your plate. Depending on the genre, you having a good self-motivation to start the show and get stuff looks and start getting all that stuff prepped is a very collaborative thing. So when you're the programmer, you take all that on and then you're seeing the other side of it, and then you eventually just have to make that decision. I got a lot of really advice from a lot of the lighting designers that I was working for at the time as a programmer, that that there's a perception amongst our producers and everybody else that are hiring us that you're either a lighting designer or a programmer. So the advice that I got from a lot of the lighting designers that I worked for was that you just got to cut bait. I know a lot of other people will keep one foot in the programmer's chair and the other in the control room. But it was really a matter of, if you're going to be the lighting designer, then be the lighting designer and make that cut, which is a scary jump to make, considering that you've built all of your relationships and everything else as a programmer, and trying to make that jump is a bit of a challenge and kind of scary. But that happens in a lot of phases of the relationship and your career, because leaving Disney, which was a full-time job and very fulfilling, to go out for greener pastures, you know, you're leaving a guaranteed income behind, and jumping into something new, and that's a challenge and scary, but at the same time can be very rewarding.
Do you find it easier for you now to talk to a lighting programmer because you come from that side, or do you find it actually a bit more frustrating because you actually know exactly what you want and you have to, you know, he may have a different style of work, and like, how's that process for you?
It was actually very challenging at first. I think if you were to talk to some of the programmers that I was working with when I first made that transition, I think it was difficult, because I knew I have an idea in my head of how fast I was as a programmer. And when you're sitting there in a control room and everybody's looking at you going, why is it taking so long? And to understand that frustration. So yes, the relationship, it's always a communication thing between the programmer and the designer. And that trust that you're there, and they're doing everything they can because they're part of the team, and they realize that requirement.
Ed, you touched on that earlier, the trust factor. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, it's just knowing that, like, if you're setting something up and you're like, okay, you're giving someone, hey, we need to do 3 songs, we have half the day to do it, but then you get stuck pulled into a meeting, coming back out, you know that guy that you have sitting behind that console is going to move forward and start nailing that out, and not just kind of waiting for direction, but also them knowing what you want and how your style of lighting essentially you want on that stage.
Cool.
And then, I mean, I know Josh works with certain programmers, same as me, and it's hard. Well, Josh has jumped off already. I'm the one that goes back and forth all the time. But it is hard for me when someone's actually on the desk that well, because then you're like, all right, what's going on? It should be this, it should be that. So for me, it gets a little chaotic to this day.
All right. Well, let's see what Victor has to say on the topic of programming.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed our conversations together about your philosophies on lighting programming and the console layouts. And I know you and Matthias have enjoyed some conversations there.
Yeah, where do the encoders go? Yeah.
Left side of the console, up and down, muscle memory. Well, you know, I came up with now, I think it's because it's more, I've always thought that most board ops were frustrated musicians or good musicians that couldn't get into a band. So I always played the console like it was an instrument. So that's why the knobs just felt natural on the left side.
Makes sense to me.
I mean, you know, and it is a muscle memory thing where you don't really have to look. I remember being told by Jim Waits when I was being trained, you're not supposed to look at the console. You're supposed to be looking at what you're lighting.
Yeah, that seems to be getting lost lately, unfortunately. There's a lot of people that program consoles and not the lights on the stage anymore or the performance. They're very focused on their
Absolutely
screens and a lot of button pushes.
But I think that's a generational thing too. Younger people are more into it. I just missed the days because when I started, there was a candle in the moving light. 7 lights on a Broadway show was a big deal. So moving lights. Yeah, no. And you know, you're sitting there with people like Jules Fisher and Peggy Eisenhower and you know, when you're doing TV, Alan Edelman and all these great designers. And I was fortunate that I knew nothing about lighting, so they taught me. I just was really good at being able to run the console, but when it came down to learning how to light, they gave me the greatest education you can possibly imagine. Also, when I started, I got to go through all the principles. A lot of people don't get that today. You know, I did Broadway touring, concerts, television, weddings, parties.
Yeah.
I mean,
We all done weddings.
Yeah, but I got flown. I had to get flown to London to do it. That was the kind of weird part, you know. But I got to do some really great things, and I was fortunate enough to come into an industry that just started and learn from the designers who were kind of learning along with us, because the technology was new to them too as well.
So obviously Victor got started in this a little earlier than all of us and all of you guys. But he does mention some pretty key people: Jules Fisher, Peggy Eisenhower in the theater world, and Alan Edelman on the TV side. You know, who are some mentors for you guys who kind of really got you where you are, kind of across genres, whether that be at Disney or as you progress through? Ed?
I mean, it first started with, you know, my high school theater teacher, then moved to a production manager, Estela Scalata, from the theater that I was working at, and then moved to Casey Wilkerson at Disney. That let me play a lot out there at the park, doing different events. And then for TV, moved to Michael Veerkamp. And then currently Adam Biggs, who's the DP that I do a lot of stuff with. Great.
Josh, how about you? Any key people in your life that have been mentors or key influences?
Certainly, many. Starting with really great mentors coming up. David Masterson, when was the artistic director at the small theater that I worked at, that really got me brought up and taught me a lot of the the ethics and how to deal with the situations. Moving into Disney, Bill of Zeradel was the technical director that put me on an awful lot of shows as a designer and programmer, and introduced me to one of his good friends from childhood, John Morgan, who got me into the television world. Once there, I'd have to say Oscar Dominguez was one of the first designers that I got to program for in television. Simon Miles, Kieran Healy, Bob Barnhart, Al Gurdon, all of which have had massive influences on me as a designer and as a programmer, and really taught me the right way and the wrong ways of doing things, and gave me an opportunity to really work with a lot of different camps and different situations and different types of television shows, and the responsibilities and the requirements of each. So yeah, obviously I think that's one thing that I think most of us can say as a background, is that's really, it's those who brought us along with them, and gave us the opportunities to learn and to kind of move forward. I can't imagine how you would do it without having that level of mentor.
So I'm looking at this question stream as it's coming along, and someone mentions like, oh, these guys got a lot of opportunity. So how do you guys think you guys came across those? Was it these mentors that you were able to cross paths with, or was it really a Disney scenario that opened up a lot of opportunities for you guys as far as, meeting additional people and networking and those sorts of things?
Well, I think for me personally, I think it's whenever I hear somebody say that, oh, you were in the right place at the right time. And I always add that there's a third variable to that you have to be in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. I've seen many people get opportunities that they weren't ready for, and that has lasting repercussions, because first impersonations of how people work and what they do and where they are in their career can kind of create a stigma with them. So I think a lot of it is being in the right place and having that skill set, and to put yourself in a position to take those challenges and take those risks and jump into a pool that's just a little bit deeper than you're comfortable swimming in. But I think the opportunities from getting yourself into that right place is a variable that's really hard to kind of help people get to. Disney was an amazing opportunity because it allowed me opportunities where I was allowed to fail. At a certain level in a career, those failure rates have a much bigger impact on your career moving forward. So I think that's an amazing opportunity. I think a lot of people find that in a college scenario or in a non-union or an early phase of their career, to kind of have that opportunity to learn and stretch.
Ed, do you have anything else to add to that side of the equation?
I totally agree with Josh. I mean, the only thing I would add to that would just be kind to people, just treat everyone like you want to get treated, and it goes from there, I mean, I think me and Josh have just been on this wild roller coaster, and it did jump and dive off from Disney. Just be kind.
That's really good insight. Matthias, how about you? Mentors?
I have a few mentors, yes. One definitely I would have to point out is Michael Nevitt, who helped me just as he helped had helped Ed. I got to know him actually in a whole hog training class that we did in early 2000s, which was sort of the door opener for all of the work I've been doing now in the US. I met just so many people. So I was definitely at the right point at the right time.
Fantastic. So now that we've kind of sort of the progression from coming into the industry, programming, some of that relationship-based stuff, getting the opportunities, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Loader to introduce us to the technical side a little bit.
Joe's.
So let's move a little bit to now the technology, and I know you're a very technical lighting designer in that you get very deep in the technology as far as moving lights go. Have you seen the transition from static lighting to automated lighting? And let's talk about television to start.
Oh, well, it's funny. I getting ready for this, I started thinking about the first time when I started, pretty much it was a VL2C, and and the VL4. But then the VL5 came out in 1991-ish, and it was from that moment TV changed. You know, lighting became more automated, less conventional, because the VL5, VL6 combination gave designers the ability to have a lot of these fixtures, a lot of park hands and a lot of moving park hands and a lot of moving Legos with no shutters. So you would literally see the show counts change from the amount of conventional versus the amount of automated. So, and as time has gone on, it's just gotten less and less conventional. I mean, yeah, conventional, because if you have the money, there's some amazing automated fixtures to hang in place of a Lego.
So obviously Victor talks about the VL2C, VL5, VL6 products, kind of the first intro into automated moving lights. And what are some products that, you know, were kind of stalwarts when you guys got started? And then sort of as transition from static to automated, you know, what are some things you've really tried to bring into the forefront as tools for you guys? Josh, you want to start us off?
Sure. I think really when I first started into television, since that'll be the specialty, I guess, the television, at the time when I got started was a couple years after Victor. I was at the tail end of the 2C era, big into the VL5s, VL6s, a lot of VL3000s were starting to become the workhorse, Mac 2K washes. Those were our workhorse fixtures for a lot of the television aspects. But still on a lot of the shows, we'd still have hundreds of dimmers. Conventionals, set practicals, the smaller end of the fixtures weren't really available yet. So we were still using a lot of park hands for eye candy and whatnot. That slowly started to evolve when the price of the fixtures and the price and availability of the automated lights started coming down to where it started to offset the labor bills. For us, I think that was our biggest point, is that we could rent more moving lights and more automated lights to offset the conventionals just from a sheer time standpoint. The amount of time it takes 2 or 3 ladder teams to focus 200 conventional lights, a good programmer can do in a third of the time. So as far as installing the lights, it was roughly about the same amount of people, same labor calls, but we were able to do it in much shorter days, quicker time frame. We were able to adapt much quicker as the show progressed and evolved. Desks were moving, contestants would move and change very quickly in a commercial break, where it was rehearsed downstage right, now it's going to be downstage left. In the conventional world, we would have been sunk. So it allowed us to really use the automated, and that's where I started seeing the switch from more conventionals and less automated lights, which were more effects and gag scenarios, to the moving lights really being the workhorse in the industry, and conventionals going away for all but purposes that you knew were going to be locked and that you would never need to really send a team up to refocus, regel, move shutter cuts. So the ability to just have that from the desk, where I can just call it out a note to my programmer and have those things adjusted very quickly, allows the productions to move at a much faster pace. So that was in my mind, that was the real driving force behind moving from conventionals to automated, was just the speed at which we can operate.
Do you remember the first time you intentionally used an automated fixture as a key light to, where you really replaced a Lego and said, I'm going to go with a framing fixture?
Sure. I think the first time we did it was on the judge's desk at American Idol. Kieran Healy had been working with a company called Prism Projection, and that was a fixed ellipsoidal fixture, had I think a 7-color LED engine, and we used those as our fixed key positions for the judge's desk so that it could give us more accurate color. Even before that, I think we were using VL1000s, VL3500s, that we started using as key lights. And those were, I think, probably about 10 years ago is when we started trusting the automated lights for key lighting positions, as opposed to the known tried and true of a conventional.
Okay. Ed, obviously you do some shows in a lot of different environments. I mean, Ninja Warrior is mostly outside. I would imagine the transition from static to automated becomes a much more robust scenario for you, given positions and points and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, we still are probably, I'm not going to say 50-50. I'm going to say more 80-20. We still have regular park hands and Lecos lighting up the inside of the course, even though key lights and backlights are movers. We've had, thank God, the industry in the last couple of years has pushed more of the IP fixtures out there. So we've swapped to that, being an outdoor course with the elements. I mean, Ninja's been through, we've loaded in through the snow, we've had rains, we've had tornadoes, we almost had a hurricane hit us. We've always lit that show. All the hosts are lit with a key light, an automated light. This year, before we canceled, we were going to swap over to an LED engine for the key lights. Hopefully we will get there once we're done with this quarantine. Yeah.
Then going back to what you mentioned with Deal or No Deal, was that a lot of automated fixtures?
Deal or No Deal was 90% automated. I think we had some Lecos lighting up scenic pieces.
The contestants were all Lecos.
The
There was a big grid of Lecos doing every
the contestants,
doing the
and then
case.
Howie's Ring of Fire, as we called it, was Lecos also. I think at that point, Michael Bierkamp, who was the LD on the show at that point, was a little nervous keen with movers. But what had happened was that there was points where, just like Josh touched, where they would move someone two minutes before you go back on, and Howie would want to go here or there. So the spots weren't able to hit him. We had 4 spots around. So we would actually light it with the VL3000.
I remember that set was completely lit with LEDs. It was all backlit, all the stairs. One of the first ones where really
the iCoves were played.
A lot of stuff. We've not like a media server already. They're playing some pixel map. We were quite early for some of the stuff we tried there.
I remember we actually pixel mapped. Remember the whole stadium, and we had effects going through it and everything. And producers came out and were like, "That's cool." Yeah, we never want to see this on TV. Just stop it, please. It's making us sick.
Fun.
If we were doing a rave, yeah, I think it would be great.
So Ed, are you basically pointing out that when you got started, it had already been kind of a transition from static to automated fixtures for key lights in a lot of applications?
Yeah, most of the DPs or LDs that I started with were a little scared to key with movers, and then they learned that having the movers, trusting the movers, made life easier, because you didn't have guys having to refocus right before a shot, and then if they moved the table, moved the host, whatever subject matter we were shooting, we were able to light it quicker. So they kind of rolled over in that part.
Interesting. Well, I guess going to that topic of fear, switching from static to automated was fear. How about the transition from traditional lamp sources to LED? And obviously early LED with its multiple sources. Josh, you have any input on that transition as it pertains to the TV broadcast side of things?
Yeah, I'll be happy if I never see Skittles again. I guess is the biggest point. Once we start homogenizing the sources, where we didn't see a red and a green LED in a close up of a background, then that started really changing the ability of how and where we use the LED sources. From a key lighting perspective, the real first challenge that we had when we started moving to LED sources was our color meters no longer worked. Those of us who were, our standard color meter was a Minolta 3F color meter, and it just couldn't read the square waves of the LED fixtures as easily. So that was the first thing that we had to overcome, is that you just don't trust your meter. And you really had to trust your eye until we can get the new meters into our hands that could handle a wider spectrum. The trust aspect of the automated and the LED engines was the key lighting fixtures that were an LED engine obviously came a ways after the LED of the wash lights. Being the wash lights having the first real introduction of the LED, the trust factor of the engines was kind of already given. We had, I think we were when the VLX first came out. That was a kind of a giant head automated wash light. And you learn to trust it, and they were very consistent across the fixtures. They were all of the problems that we had with arc source, with aging lamps and everything else, was kind of corrected and made it a lot easier to handle a large rig and have everything look consistent. So it was an evolution that we all saw coming, that we knew eventually we were going to get into ellipsoidal type fixtures and shutterable fixtures that were just going to change the engine, and it's happened really well. You look at the Monets that you guys have, and then the Picassos, the spectrum on it, and the flat field, and in a lot of ways we've leapfrogged the conventional fixtures and the conventional and automated arc source fixtures.
Awesome. Ed, how about you? Like that transition to lamp? I mean, I know you use a lot of lamp fixtures still, but this year you're going to plan to switch over some things.
I think, well, I know why we still use a lot of lamp sources, is that it's budget for us. I mean, I had one show that I had drawn in a bunch of Proteus Maximus because it was an outdoor obstacle, and the total came out to like 85 Proteuses, and then they looked at the number and they're like, we can't do this. So we had to swap over to 2Ks and Vipers with rain shields, and it was a nightmare. I mean, we lost a good 6 to 8 lamps a day. So it got to the point now where if that show does come back, they've already okayed the budget to move to an outdoor IP fixture.
Awesome. And then on LED to traditional lamp source, has there been any pushback from the talent or from producers or from your DPs as far as the look or the feel? I've heard other designers talk about a wrap, on how the light wraps around people's faces.
We haven't really encountered that. As far as producers, at the end of the day, if the money's there, they really don't care. Hosts don't really care. There is some shows that it'd be hard for me to switch to an LED source, just because it's, say, a food show, Hell's Kitchen. We want to shoot that 3200, and I know fixtures, we could get a 3200 chip, but then it gets down to cost again, But with Hell's Kitchen, if that show were to come back, we probably would switch over just because of heat. Because in the grid is sometimes almost like 130 degrees, because you have all the ovens, all the stove tops, and the heat just goes up. And we're not in a traditional studio, The last season was shot in a tent. The season before that was shot in Costco, abandoned Costco.
Interesting. I did get a question online while we're on the topic of transitions and what's going to be the new next thing. Tiffany keys, which we all know, or who we all know. If key lighting with movers was kind of like a big step forward, a big leap, what do you guys see as the next leap in that section of the world in TV and broadcast?
I think it's going everything LED, losing the dimmers and going to 100% rig of LEDs of some type.
Josh?
What would be considered key lighting with movers? In my opinion, anything key lighting is anything that approaches the face lighting of a talent or that aspect. What the next big thing of it in? Obviously, I think the evolution is one to just kind of bring the rest of the gear up to the level we're at. I'm not quite sure what the next evolution of it is. I know we're getting more and more capability with soft panel lighting. And as soon as we can get the lumens up on it to where we can use it from a bigger throw distance would be helpful. Because we're still, most of the studio work, a lot of the studio work, we're looking at 30 to 40 foot trims. So soft lighting is a little difficult without going to an actual wash light, but something more of a panel light that's got a little more throw ability would be nice. But yeah, I think key lighting from a general, I don't know if she's asking for my definition of key lighting is, or what is the difference between key lighting with conventional or.
Well, she's more asking like if key lighting with a mover was like a leap for TV broadcast designers to start doing, what would be the next leap? What would be the next technique that would be a unique piece or a next evolution? Like Ed said, all LED would be something that would make a difference and a trust factor change.
Not quite sure. I think along with everything, it's an evolution. And most of our evolution is relatively slow. I mean, we've seen over the past 15 years a lot of the evolution from conventionals to automated to LED sourced automated. And I think we're going to continue with that evolution slowly. I don't know what the next big leap is. Typically, broadcast is a little shy of making huge leaps just because of the potential for failure and the size of the audience. And the ability to appease not only production companies but the network or the studio or the artists. There's a built-in comfort factor that they know and trust, and you have to slowly evolve that trust factor.
That's actually a perfect segue to cut to our friend Victor Fable, who's been in this a little longer, seen a little more transition. See what Victor has to say.
And you've done a few projects lately where you've gone pretty much all automated now, right? Or at least
yeah.
all LED even. Right?
Everything, well, let me see. I'm not going to say everything. 99.2% of the stuff I've done for the last 5-6 years has been completely automated. I've upgraded 4 or 5 stages completely automated. Completely LED.
Yeah.
And mostly
so
automated.
What isn't automated at this point for you as far as moving technology? What's not moving right now?
Boy, I really wish I had a panning and tilting panel light. That would really make me a happy little camper. Actually, that's pretty much what, if you really take a look at it, what Eric, you and I met, I think, in 2007-ish.
Yes.
And I think the first product was the Octo Strip.
Yes.
So the greatest thing is watch your Elation just go. It went from that. I think then it was the impression.
Mm-hmm.
When you guys are still dealing with it, but
remember we had the Vic bricks.
Yes, we had Vic bricks, and technically the profile from Verilight from whoever they are, PRG, is still called the Octovix or Vic sticks. Vic sticks, that's what they're called.
There you go.
So yeah, I've jumped on the LED thing a long time ago. My wife and I were going through some notes. The first LED show I did, which wasn't a show, it was a trade show booth, was in early 2000
Wow.
when I lived in New York. So yeah, I'm a big proponent. It can't replace everything, but for most things, every once in a while I do kind of like that warmth of a Liga. But it's more for a special than it is to actually light. I've had great luck with being able to keep people with automated LED fixtures. Gotten very little complaint.
So as Victor talks about, he's kind of moved to all LED as much as possible. But he also mentions there's some things that just can't get changed. What is not something you can replace right now that is, with a new LED or some, new source? Josh?
I think as a general, we've gotten pretty good with our workhorses being LED sources now. My biggest thing is in most of the television shows that I do is my fixture counts are really based on workhorses. I think when we get into the specific gag lighting or band ads or unique something that's very function specific, I think there's still some of the smaller beam lights, I think, are still a little further away from having an LED source, although they're getting there very quickly. I think for the most part, I think there's an LED option for just about every type of tool that I would want to use. Now it's just a matter of availability at the rental houses. It's available in addition to availability, but cost per unit is still a factor, because obviously the latest and greatest and newest toys come at a premium cost. But for the most part, I think probably about 95% of my rigs lately have all been LED based.
Do you stick to your sort of traditional spot profile wash beam? Do you try to light everything with one product now on your stage and just like keep the fixture types down and just use only one type for everything? Like, how do you approach this?
Most of the time I'm still using a hard edge and a wash as my base. We're getting a little bit better with some of the hybrids. Some of the larger format hard edge lights do a very effective job as a wash light. So I think we're getting to the point where we have the options of being able to almost have a majority of the rig being a single fixture type, which helps for a lot of aspects. It helps for maintenance. It helps for the ability to put more specific lights in a corner or a hard to reach place and be able to have a light do dual function of being a wash in one performance or being a hard edge beam air graphic in another. So as the options become available and the technology grows a little bit better, the ability to have more of a hybrid fixture is really helpful, with the exception of, like I said earlier, the more specific gag, one-off type of look that is unique to that fixture type. But for the most part, yeah, I think I hate when I was a programmer, I hated having 25 different fixture types patched. It's just a lot more organizational issues. It's color matching, you're upgrading your palettes across fixture types. It's a lot easier and a lot faster to be able to work with less fixture types. And if those fixture types have the ability to do more, then that's better.
So that's kind of a good transition. Ed and Victor talked about the OctaStrip early on, Elation product. Josh, I know you're a big still user of the iCove products, just because it's tried and true and you know exactly what it's doing. It's not that old in comparison to some of the things we're talking about, but at the same time, it's something you haven't really been able to replace and find a good replacement for. Ed, I know you use a lot of products like behind me, the Q-Pix, and other things for set pieces. You want to expand on that with LED and maybe what you haven't been able to replace yet?
Sure. I guess I'm not popping up. What have we not been able to replace? I think a lot of this, what Josh had said, the smaller spot beam fixtures, the Sharpie types and all that, switching to LED. I haven't seen anything out there that is widely available. The other thing for me would be 8 lights. I mean, I've seen tons of the LED types, but it's that glow, that low glow that you doesn't get there with LED for some reason. Trying to think, what was the other question? Trying to think here.
Is there any product that you just can't do without right now?
A lot of my shows are, I'm not going to say wing it, but since we're outdoors, your environment changes all the time, from trees to different skylines. We have a lot of the big RA Maxes, movie type lights. One of my new kind of favorite lights is actually the Paladin panel. We have a show that we've got season done, and we added 24 of them just to have, and we pretty much I think we used every one. We haven't used the spares. And I mean, they're IP rated, so they got hit by water jets. We lit audience with them. We lit scenic pieces with them. We used them in pretty much lighting every kind of aspect that we did.
Interesting. Obviously, Ed, behind you have those Astera tubes. Victor talks about, set pieces, and I know like Versa tubes were a big thing. Obviously, LED tape, pixel tape has become kind of a big thing. I know, Josh, you've tried to stay away from that for a number of reasons. Is there anything that's not driving you to that LED tape?
I think we use an extensive amount of LED tape. I think the only time where I have a hesitation is when I need to break it up into more control channels. We're still in the middle ground between 50 or between 5 meters of control on a single channel fixture, and then jumping to the 170 control channels, a universe on a strip of pixel tape. It really comes down to a cost benefit of what fixture we're going to put in there, and oftentimes I'll talk with the production designer and scenic designer about replacing LED tape with either iCoves or something else. Even though it's a much older fixture, it still does the job of a 1 foot increment better than most things that I've seen lately. So if there's something about having a linear fixture that is either in a 6-inch or a 1 foot section to kind of upgrade and improve on what the iCoves did. But ultimately, if you want to put pixel tape and everything, then we're obviously massively increasing our DMX processing and coming with a different cost. So you have to balance the ability to use that as a tool with the other costs of how it's going to affect your rig and your console control and everything else.
That's obviously, processing is a big deal these days, especially at the cost per nodes and all those other things. Matthias, while we're on the technical side of things, is any questions for these gentlemen before we move through the last 6 minutes here?
Yeah, maybe just back on the key lighting with LED. Obviously, there's always a lot of talk on color rendering, the color quality. Early LEDs probably burned a lot of people, where the quality just wasn't there. The spectrum was not great. An RGB LED was maybe very, very purple, and it almost could not do a proper white. Do you find that with the instruments now, is that solved? Is it better than you used to be able to do it with conventional or discharge fixtures? Is it equal to you? Maybe you can give me an opinion where we're at right now, when you can pick an instrument off the shelf, put it up there, light somebody. Can you do you feel fully confident in it? Does it do everything you need it to, and does it actually look as good as you need it to?
I feel it's fine. Switching to an LED, not having a lamp change a different color. So I pick LEDs for key lights whenever I can.
I would agree with that. I think the consistency has gotten good. I think there's something to be said about a large aperture soft light. There's something about a 2K Fresnel that just wraps beautifully around a face, and that's what we've always considered to be the standard. I think it's a little harder to do that with LEDs. I think to kind of fix that, we use multiple angles and multiple fixtures to get a nice wrap and a fill. But I think from a quality of light standpoint, certainly my latest favorite toy is the Monets. Because I switched over to using those as my primary key light and large format spot fixture, just because the inconsistencies that I was getting with arc source lamps from rental houses. Before that, the Best Boy, whatever the version of it was my previous key light fixture of choice, and I've just found a much more consistent quality of light across multiple fixtures with the LEDs because of the lamp hours and everything else. It's just a more consistent across the platform than an arc source where you have no idea how old those lamps are coming out of a rental house, out of a box when we're shooting 3 days after load-in.
Do you find that your shows look more consistent over multiple seasons? So you don't have like so many sort of degradation, I guess, when you use an LED fixture versus you start with a nice set of new discharge and 6 months later it all doesn't look quite as great anymore.
Where I really found that to be was when I was programming American Idol, because at the time we had a 13-week long studio show. At the end of that 13 weeks where the lamps were on for 10 to 12 hours a day, for 4 days a week, over 13 weeks, the whole show was about a stop lower than it was at the beginning of the season, just because the lamp life, almost every lamp in the rig was past its 2,000 hour mark. And you had significantly more burnouts at the end of the season as the lamps were dying, and then you would replace one of the key lights with a brand new lamp, and talk about a hero. You ended up running it at half the intensity just to match the other lights in the rig. So with the LEDs, it's become a much more consistent, and they're not having their degradation anywhere near the length of a season.
Let's get Victor's feedback on this topic.
What's the last time you used the automated fixture as a key light? Do you remember that?
Oh my God, probably when something burned out and I had to twist the VL5 over. You know what? When we did, I was thinking we did it, we used them as key lights on the Who's Tommy, but it wasn't like it was more of a musical thing. So they'd have to come up fast and Alico couldn't do it. But I can't tell you how many times at the desk, if something had burned out or a follow spot started turning green or, whatever, or somebody decided that they were going to add a background singer, camera left, and we're not ready. I can't tell you how many times I've twisted an automated fixture over. Used to be the 5, now it's a Fuse 120, but it hasn't changed. I can't. It's funny because when we read, I don't even think about it. I try hard not to hang conventional lights.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. We have time for a couple quick questions that I've seen through the topics here. One of which is, do you guys feel that the laser technology is going to replace LED anytime soon?
I don't think anytime soon. I think it's going to be an amazing gag light for a long time until we can deal with the legislation and the ability to put it in any venue. I don't think it's going to be the workhorse. I think that's going to be coming in the next few years, but I don't see that becoming the major source of a fixture in anytime soon.
Ed, any input on that?
Totally agree with Josh. It's going to be a while before we see anything.
Great. Let's do one last question, Matthias. I see one about dimming in LEDs. Obviously, if everybody's using for key lights, there's been some advancements there. Matthias, why don't you weigh in on that?
Yeah, so a question that came in here on older fixtures, the dimming was just not so great. It was especially on the lower end where you really need it. It got steppy, or if you have multicolor fixtures, the colors started to drift. And I think all manufacturers over the last few years have done really, really great advancements on that. Where, you know, white LEDs dim down as beautiful and smooth as any conventional, really. There's a lot of tricks in there now. There's dimmer curves you can pick. So I think that is all solved technically, and that shouldn't really be an objection to using LED fixtures anymore. But it definitely wasn't great back then. It has made, you know, as everybody learned the technology more, the designers and programmers learned it more, the manufacturing side learned it more, the R&D got better and better, and the actual components that you can get have drastically improved. So what the fixtures we can build nowadays are, I think they're just phenomenal, just in a short span of maybe 4 or 5 years, what advancements everybody has made. So dimming's been really, really, really great.
That bottom 5% on the first fixtures got ugly.
Yeah.
to do a smooth transition from 20% to 0, and that last click was deadly.
Yeah, there was no arrogance in that. It was just sort of turned off. It was just.
Well, thank you guys. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
On the laser source, the only other thing is the question I would have is how much brighter do we need the lights to get? And that's the biggest thing is the LED engines are typically significantly in a studio environment are often brighter than we need. So it's a question of, do we need the laser source from an intensity position, or are we looking at it from a consistency and a durability thing? Would be my only thing to add about the laser source.
Something for a future episode.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. For those who asked questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, we'll make sure that we answer those offline. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Matthias, for joining me again. Join us next week for episode 3. We'll have Patrick Dearson and Chris Lyle joining us to discuss festivals and mostly large live outdoor events. Same time, 10 a.m. Pacific. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you so much. Have a good week.